Hi everyone, welcome to my quite late Sagittarius season 2020 talk. I do apologise for my tardiness. It's been tricky again. Nothing like heaping more on one's plate when we're already busy. But anyway, it's fun. I'm enjoying doing these, and my intention is to complete one circuit of the zodiac, and so I'm nearly there in a way. After this one, I've got 3 more to go, so we'll see how we go. It's always on a bit of a wing and a prayer. I shall stop my video and without further ado, the context that we find ourselves these days. The Scorpio lunar cycle continues and the Sagittarius solar season has commenced. So the sort of crossover between those two archetypes, Scorpio to Sagittarius, makes me think about death as an ally and how, as we integrate our finitude, we grasp the, or at least a meaning in or of life. So yeah, I feel like it's sort of in line with how we finished the Scorpio season talk last month and the excerpt from Carlos Castaneda's Separate Reality. That sort of idea remains with me through this Scorpio lunar cycle and our now flowing into, is it flowing? More like jolting into eclipse season, which for me at least has sort of come on with a vengeance. And not to lose sight, of course, of Mars direct beginning to move forwards again, which is certainly shifting things in my life and in the lives of people around me noticeably. It's interesting. And Neptune stationing direct today. Neptune having been retrograde since the 23rd of June, at almost 21 degrees of Pisces. It is now at 18 and a bit degrees of Pisces, and closely squaring the nodes for this eclipse season. True Black Moon Lilith ingresses Gemini on the 6th of December, while mean Black Moon Lilith is in Taurus since the 21st of October, remaining there until the 18th of July 2021. I like using both. I really appreciate the steady pace and reliable sort of movement of mean Black Moon Lilith, and I have really good results using mean Black Moon Lilith. And I like the 9-month span of time that she spends in each sign. But I also appreciate true Black Moon Lilith's oscillating, unpredictable nature. And I think they're both worth being aware of, at least. Pallas Athena returns to Aquarius on the 7th of December. Hygeia stations retrograde on the 9th of December, halfway through Leo. Chiron stations direct on the 16th of December, and Mars is moving. I haven't got a Mars slide this month, so I'm just mentioning here that Mars moves from 15 degrees and 38 minutes of Aries to 23 degrees and 4 minutes through Sagittarius season. I want to honour Emily Dickinson. She really says Scorpio to Sag so well. So I've just, rather than having to choose a poem, which felt too hard, I went with just a selection of quotes that really nail it for me. Truth is such a rare thing. It is delightful to tell it. Saying nothing sometimes says the most. To live is so startling. It leaves but little room for other occupations. Hope is the thing with feathers. that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. Behind me dips eternity, before me immortality, myself the term between. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. That it will never come again is what makes life so sweet. The image, which is of poor quality in its reproduction, I'm sorry about that, is called Melancholy from Marie Bracquemond, who has Sun in Sagittarius. So the Sun ingressed Sagittarius several days ago now. Moon's already in Taurus and or halfway through Taurus, and yes, Sun's at 6 degrees Sagittarius as I record this under the moonlight. So yes, at Sun's ingress, Jupiter was sandwiched between Pluto and Pallas Athena and Saturn. And then there are these remaining aspects to which I am not going to I'm not going to parrot them. I'm going to let them speak for themselves. We have almost done a complete circuit of the zodiac in relation to the Capricorn shitstorm that we've known through 2020, beginning of course in January with eclipses, as well as the much spoken about Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which also involved Ceres in Mercury and the Sun, as well as all the other transitory players, and Pallas Athena, though she wasn't there right at that point, she's been through in Capricorn all year long, and so a very pertinent player to my mind. However, the rest of these everybody can read and take a screenshot and make use of. This beautiful image is called the Swan number 17 from Hilma Afklint, who had Moon North Node in Sagittarius. Mid-Sagittarius, I have no birth time for her, but confidently she had Moon in Sag. And she also had Sun, Mercury and Pallas Athena and Ceres in Scorpio. The quote comes from Carl Jung. Doubt is the crown of life, and all certainty is merely one-sided. For in uncertainty and doubt, truth and error come together. Doubt is life. Truth is often stagnation and death. When you are in doubt, you have the greatest opportunity to unite the dark and the light sides of life. I feel like this really epitomizes, in a way, the Neptune square to the lunar nodes, which will be exact on the 26th of January, and so I'll talk about it more in coming presentations, and I've been talking about it for months, along with many other astrologers. It feels incredibly potent in the times that we're living. It feels as though what we are observing, experiencing within the collective and as well our own personal lives is very much, of course, I mean, it's obvious the polarization and the division. And to me, I wonder about it in relation to the Jungian idea of enantiodromia. Talk more about that in relation to the eclipses. Mercury through Scorpio, moving fast. Mercury is direct, of course, and moving this season from 14 degrees and 37 minutes of Scorpio to the first degree of Capricorn, which for me feels like that transition between coming to consciousness around the powers beyond our control, such as death, of course, in Scorpio, which informs our capacity to make meaning in Sagittarius, from which we are able to build something of significance, a visible and tangible representation of who we are in Capricorn. Mercury, of course, acts as our guide in terms of the evolutionary axis of the lunar nodes, and Gemini being the home of the North Node currently. Mercury ruling Gemini, so thus is our guide, perhaps more important than ever in a way. Always important is Mercury. But in relation to this role as a guide, and a very important one for our times, I can't ignore the 3 conjunctions that Mercury has made through the retrograde period with Juno, asteroid Juno. So the 3rd conjunction took place yesterday, is now separating. The first meeting was on the 30th of September, and the retrograde conjunction was on the 19th of October. I think about Juno in terms of our commitments and our alliances, and so we can think about this conjunction between Mercury and Juno as being an opportunity to reflect upon what explicit or implicit alliances and commitments have we made, or do we make, through our compliance and our inertia. It's kind of blunt and Sagittarian, isn't it? That's okay. This time of year. Here are the aspects as Mercury travels through Sagittarius from the 2nd of December. And perhaps most importantly, well, there's several important ones there. The square to Ceres and the trine to Chiron on the 5th of December, I'm sure are potent. Will be potent. The square to Neptune on the 13th of December as well, and then the conjunction the following day on the 14th of December to the South Lunar Node. Yes, so I think Mercury is certainly keeping things moving this month. The superior conjunction as well with the Sun at 28 degrees and 42 minutes for Sagittarius on the 20th of December is a very potent moment. Here is another long list of aspects, and I will not bore you by reading them aloud, but just to note that Venus travels from the 1st degree of Scorpio to 7 degrees of Sagittarius through this Sagittarius season. And importantly, perhaps I'll just note I even have a whole slide for this Venus Moongate coming to the sacral chakra on the 13th of December. So on the 13th of November, we came to the solar plexus Moongate according to shamanic astrology, which to me feels like the letting go of people-pleasing tendencies, peace at any price, the need for approval, a lack of boundaries, and control frequently around that solar plexus. Just as a reminder, the moon gates are when we are looking at the morning star, Venus as a morning star, it is in line with Inanna's journey to the underworld to visit her sister, and as she moves through those 7 gates, she is obliged to lay down an adornment, a piece of jewelry, clothing, so that she arrives at her sister bowed low, stripped bare and bowed low, I believe is not a good paraphrasing, but I think they're the words used in the text. So, and this month at the 13th of December, the balsamic moon conjunction with Venus in the dawn sky on that day, the moon gate will be the sacral chakra, and I'll be doing more work with that and say a little more about that next month, but broadly, themes around letting go of identification with emotions, codependency and guilt are very resonant with that sacral chakra. As well, that conjunction between Venus and the balsamic moon is applying to conjoin Juno again. Juno representing that those things to which we are committed and faithful, for better and worse. And just that quote that I wanted to include from Edna St. Vincent Millay, beauty is whatever gives joy. So the Gemini full moon eclipse, of course, on the 30th of November, just a couple of days away now. Neptune is, of course, stationing direct today, as I said, and squaring the lunar nodes. I think about this eclipse season as perhaps an escalation or perhaps an amplification of this necessity of polarization, division, the disillusionment, the confusion. It's all been unfolding throughout the year, and perhaps coming to a head through this Neptune squaring the nodes. But I really view it as necessary in some ways, in the sense that it brings us to consciousness about it, which is sort of how shadow stuff works, isn't it? That we need to express it negatively so that we are able to wake up to ourselves. So I feel like that's hopefully what's going to happen through this period of time. Are we able to wake up? Are we able to then remain woke, not go back to sleep? And as well, the idea of that Jungian concept of enantiodromia, and how one thing, when we position ourselves at one end of a spectrum, we invariably end up turning into the thing at the opposite end of that spectrum. So we turn into our own opposite. But the thing with that is that it is good medicine, and it's like a recalibration, a rebalancing that occurs through that in some unconscious kind of way. But as we become more aware of our doing this and more aware of it in the collective, I mean, it's certainly quite comical in some ways, if it weren't so bloody awful and tragic. But yes, it's just an interesting idea that I've been thinking about a lot lately. So the full moon is separating from the square to Ceres at 3 Pisces and applying to square Vesta at 13 Virgo. So I think that's important, that mutable cross that's been active for a few months and continues in its activation via the nodes, and Vesta being in Virgo for a period of time. I think she dips into Libra, but she returns retrograde to Virgo. So just in reflection, learning what this year has meant to us under the light of this full moon eclipse, this North Node eclipse, thinking about it in terms of life cycles and process around Ceres, and in terms of Vesta, where will we focus our attention now? It's important, isn't it? It's like, what's that new agey kind of line, where attention goes, energy flows, or something like that. But I think it's true, isn't it? It's like kind of a law. And Mercury, as ruler of the Gemini full moon, is separating from Juno, which is a call to ponder what lies beneath, and Jupiter still amidst Capricornucopia up there. So just having some gratitude perhaps around our many blessings, even as we look upon the intensity and chaos of the world's transformation. It is very, perhaps we're all a bit numb to it now. I don't know. It's been a crazy year, and yes, what's it all going to mean? I guess we won't know until we have the benefit of hindsight, and we've gone a little ways further down the road. This beautiful painting is called Moonlight from Munch. One of the incredible, I think he's impressionist. I'm not an art not educated, but he was around the time of that that whole bunch of incredible artists and creative people with Pluto in Taurus. He had Sun, Mercury in Sagittarius, and Venus, Jupiter, Mars, North Node in Scorpio. So I've just shared here a few Gemini kinds of themes and keywords to give a little food for thought as we're perhaps sitting under the lovely moonlight in a scene not dissimilar to this beautiful painting, having a moment of dadiri, if we are lucky, the practice of quiet and deep listening, contemplating communication, information and too much information, stories, our own story and his story or her story, voice and speech, hearing and listening, dialogue and conversation, open-mindedness and curiosity, polarity and duality. Gemini, Virgo, Mercury, they're so underrated, aren't they? Here's a few questions as well to ponder, perhaps. How does our world view, this is kind of in light of Sagittarius season as well, how does our world view, support, enable, empower, and or victimize us? How is our worldview being shaped by our experiences? How much relies on stories of what's past? How much relies on narratives provided by external authorities? Are we listening to life itself, which is so much a part of that Virgo piece? Are we speaking back? And this quote, perhaps my favourite quote, one of my absolute favourite quotes, and I misquote it, so I've included it here so I don't muck it up, because I like talking about it in relation to Gemini and the two columns there in the Gemini symbol of the twins. Take your well-disciplined strengths and stretch them between two poles, because inside human beings is where God learns. This painting is another one from Munch called Young Woman on the Shore. And the quote from William Blake, who had, he was born at the Sagittarius conjunction of Pluto and Eris. And yes, so he had Pluto, Eris, Sun and Jupiter in Sagittarius, with Mercury in Scorpio, and also a Capricorn stellium that I'm going to talk more about next month, because I've been reading America, A Prophecy, which is an incredibly prophetic, it's just so incredibly powerful for these times, especially in relation to what's going on in the US, but also throughout the Western world, I think. And he was indeed a prophet. So yes, he was born at that, or just after, sorry, like just very close to the conjunction between Pluto and Eris, of which we are now at the third quarter square in that cycle. So 1757 he was born. And here I am at that Pluto-Eris third quarter square, which is very potent from 2017 into 2023. And just noting again that this is the first time for which we have been aware, this is the first aspect, or hard aspect especially, for which we have been aware of Eris's existence in a planetary form. And the conjunction, which occurred, of course, in 1756, then several squares around 1907, oppositions around 1976, and now the third quarter squares around 2017 through 2023, and particularly around this year and next year. So the Pluto square Eris for this month is exact again and precise, perfecting on the 11th of December. The Sagittarius new moon, south node eclipse, on the 15th of December at 23 degrees of Sagittarius is trine to Eris, and they are still, Eris and Pluto are still in a partile square there. And so very active through this south node eclipse time. Mercury is at 20 degrees of Sagittarius, coming just a few days away from that superior conjunction, and the reseeding that occurs around that time. I've included there asteroid Venus, who is actually conjunct the south node at 19 degrees of Sag, and just to point to Venus as like a representation of justice, and what's proper, like the conduct and a civilized society, all those kinds of things. She was also associated with the lunations of Taurus season. I think it must have been, because she would have been in Scorpio then. So just another little thing to think about, perhaps. Jupiter separating from Pluto and applying to Saturn, and just the thought around with Sagittarius season and Sagittarius as an archetype, often being known to be foolhardy and sometimes even foolish. Of course, the fool, we are lost without the fool. We need the fool to take that blind leap of faith into an uncertain future, and that's kind of where we're all at now. So perhaps we do need some of this Sagittarian foolhardiness, and in reflection it may turn out that these leaps of faith or blind optimism, kinds of hubristic even actions, may turn out to be necessary or even wise, but also to be aware. I've got there but and to be aware, because it's not necessarily a negative, and as well it's not necessarily a positive. So actions taken now have powerful consequences, for better and for worse. Of course, the new moon solar eclipses are not ideal times for intention setting, but of course with Sagittarius as arrows of intention flying around, it's good to be aware of what we're seeding, whether it's conscious or unconscious, and just taking those moments to reflect upon what we actually are communicating through our actions and our words and our thoughts and our deeds, all of those things that are actually our communication to life and the cosmos and the divine. And yes, whether we're consciously setting intentions or not, we are always making our intentions known to the universe, aren't we? My dog's growling here. This beautiful creature, the elephant of truth, I have called her here. I guess he's a boy because he's got those big tusks. Big African elephant. So the story, which I will just retell briefly, the 4 blind men who come across this creature, this elephant, and they are describing this elephant to one another without having eyes to see it. They each have a part of the elephant to hold, and they are describing their experience of the elephant. And so one can feel the enormous feet, legs, down to the ground, the solid base of the foot, and how it's like a tree trunk. The leg is so enormous, and one can feel the sides of the elephant's body and the soft underbelly, and the wrinkles and the enormity of this creature. Another has hold of the tail, which is not a probably wise idea, perhaps, but the snake-like skinnier tail and the hindquarters of this massive creature. And the fourth man has the tusks and is being felt himself by the elephant's trunk, curious trunk. So each of these men has a different experience of this elephant, of this creature, and inevitably, as they all describe their own experience of this one creature, they come into conflict. And this is like the human condition, isn't it? Like we each hold a piece of the truth and we're absolutely adamant that our version of it or our experience of it is the whole truth. But in fact, perhaps it's just a part of the truth, a part of the whole experience of human existence and condition and potential. Anyway, I really like that story. It's been with me especially since the nodes went into Gemini Sagittarius, looking at the world and how adamant we can be that our version of the truth is the right one. It's worth reflecting on and having a sense of humour about it. These beautiful paintings, altarpieces from Hilma af Klint again, and a few quotes, just two quotes here. One again from Edna St. Vincent Millay, who had Moon, Mars in Sagittarius and Jupiter in Pisces. I am glad that I paid so little attention to good advice. Had I abided by it, I might have been saved from some of my most valuable mistakes. And William Blake's, I think this quote comes from his Proverbs of Hell. If the fool would persist in his folly, he would become wise. Good wisdom. And again, William Blake's idea that a wise person has a pattern in their mind into which everything they know fits and everything they don't know could fit. This painting comes from Kandinsky, and who had Mercury, Venus, Sun in Sagittarius, circles in a circle. But I love this idea and I feel like increasingly it is true for me that that's partly why I'm doing these presentations, actually, because as I'm going through my life and going through using astrology and following the various threads that I come across, they all seem to intertwine in such beautiful and powerful ways that I just want to share that and hopefully inspire others to live their lives and follow their own threads, because I think the threads are the thing, aren't they, that are going to reweave this world back together. If we just pull on our threads and start weaving, we're going to be okay. But yeah, that idea that a wise person has a pattern in their mind. Patterns are perhaps everything. Patterns are like archetypes, aren't they? And they're also like cycles. And how astrology works is founded on this observable patterns and cycles. And I've been learning about morphic resonance through the work of Rupert Sheldrake, and I'll talk more about that next month as well. But yes, it's all very interesting. Chiron stations direct, of course, on the 16th of December, and that retrograde began on the 13th of July, spanning between 9 degrees and just past 5 degrees of Aries, of course. And the midpoint of that retrograde, the opposition to the Sun, was on the 30th of September at 7 degrees of Aries. and Chiron will emerge from the shadow on the 8th of April 2021. So just further contemplation around what Chiron, the teacher healer, is bringing through Aries. And for me, it's in the books, Carlos Castaneda's books with Don Juan have been an inseparable part of Chiron in Aries for me. And amazingly, of course, so the last time that Chiron was in Aries, which was, of course, before Chiron was actually discovered, but Chiron was in Aries when the teachings of Don Juan was first published in 1968. And not only that, but Carlos Castaneda actually has Chiron retrograde in Aries square to his lunar nodes. So I feel like those books are just so worth revisiting while Chiron is in Aries for the next few years. And just this little quote, a man of knowledge lives by acting, not by thinking about acting. It's important, isn't it? Juno sextile to Jupiter. This is really interesting. Now, the image is a photograph, of course, taken of Zeus and Hera at the base of the Athena fountain at the Austrian Parliament House. And I've kind of ruined this image by making the words legible. But I hope you can see how they're looking at each other. And I haven't seen them look at each other like that. Really in paint. I mean, sort of in paintings, but for me, this just felt really alive anyway. So I've included it here. Juno, of course, being the long-suffering wife of Zeus or Jupiter. Juno in Scorpio will sextile Jupiter on the 17th of December in the final degrees of their respective signs, Scorpio and Capricorn. That cycle began in May of 2015 and renews again in January of 2023. But in between now and then, Juno and Jupiter will be sextile to one another throughout 2021, or several times, and in a whole sign sextile through the last few months and through next year. So I think that's important. I feel like that's important. I feel like that's part of why Mercury is pointing to Juno now to look at this. And yeah, so the sextile, so interestingly, Juno ingresses Sagittarius on the 19th of December, which is the same day that Jupiter ingresses Aquarius. They have their exact sextiles on the first one being on the 17th of December, then another one on the 4th of April, and then another one on the 22nd of October. As well, Juno will make conjunctions with the South Lunar node, the true node, on the 16th of February and the 6th of July. And there are retrograde dates there as well. So it just makes me think, the big question, what beliefs and ideals or ideologies are we faithful to? And should we be faithful to them still? And in reflecting upon, I mean, it's not, Juno is a very interesting archetype, and I think she's quite demonized, isn't she? She's hard to like in some ways because she just punishes all those mere mortal women again and again and again, and she seems to not have much of a sense of humor, and she remains with Zeus no matter what he does. And I suppose in some ways you could look at that as being like, what choice does she have? Because he's Zeus. And that's a fair point. But in another way, she's Hera, she's Juno, so she's nothing to be balked at. And she's powerful in her own right, and she makes the decision to remain faithful to him no matter what, and that is incredibly meaningful. There's a lot to her mythology. She is a very complicated in some ways very simple, in the sense that she's just a raging, jealous goddess. But I don't think it's that simple, actually. I think it's more about the nuances in her mythology, and she is, in some stories, the mother of us all, in the sense of her. It is from her that the Milky Way is created. She's, yeah. I won't wax lyrical for too long about it, but I just think it's very interesting and worth awareness, worth consideration. As we finish 2020 and go into 2021, these two are intertwined, looking at each other lovingly, harmoniously for once, perhaps. So yeah, and of course the big moment that comes next season, Capricorn season, but Jupiter and Saturn will ingress Aquarius. Saturn on the 17th of December. The previous ingress, of course, was March until June 2020, but before that, the last Aquarius transit was February 91 until January 94. Jupiter will ingress Aquarius for the first time since 2010. So the last Aquarius transit for Jupiter was January 2009 until January 2010, and will ingress Aquarius again on the 19th of December until May 2021, when Jupiter ingresses Pisces, before retrograding again back to Aquarius at the end of July 2021 until the end of December. So lots of toing and froing there. Interesting times ahead, no doubt. A big shift, to say the least. And just to, I wanted to include this quote from Terence McKenna. Modern science is based upon the principle, give us one free miracle and we'll explain the rest. Perhaps this is an important part of what we're looking at going into this new era of the great conjunctions in air signs. And yes, science, of course, science is important, but it needs to reflect a little bit upon itself. Maybe. Let's hope we're going towards a more quantum perspective, increasingly open-minded. Of course, the benefits of looking at things in a limited way, focusing in on details of small things, is really helpful in some instances, and in understanding microcosm, macrocosm, perhaps. But yes, I also see the importance of looking at the whole and expanding our perspective and taking more into our scope of vision. Terence McKenna had Mercury, Mars, South Node in Sagittarius rising, and the Scorpio stellium with the Sun involved too. I'll hopefully talk more about him next season too. So Sagittarius says, I understand. And in these times of uncertainty, it is so uncomfortable to be with our not knowingness. Perhaps tapping into that full mentality and having a little bit of blind faith that we're headed in the right direction, despite appearances. This liminal time, this ending, this concurrent ending and beginning is, of course, chaos and confusion. It is very difficult to tolerate, but the cultivation of our capacity to make meaning helps us to use our suffering to expand through Sagittarius and Jupiter, which basically just means don't suffer for nothing. We're going to suffer. It's the human condition. It is a difficult time in which to live and be incarnated. So how can we make that mean something? How can we make our suffering If we can't view it as being worthwhile, can we at least give it some meaning and allow it to make us bigger instead of smaller? So suffering, of course, calls us to invite, allow, embrace, and stay with the emotional divine influxes that guide us to source. So the divine influx is the term coined by William Blake again, allowing our emotions to be viewing them as divinities, as not mere inconveniences or difficulties or problems to be solved or avoided or numbed or managed, or but rather really taking that view like Rumi inspiringly did in his amazing and very famous poem, The Guest House. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for what comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. It's very wise words, hey, even if they're a crowd of sorrows sweeping out the furniture, which sometimes it feels like that. But we just don't know what's coming. We don't know what's around the corner. And while that is a very uncomfortable, difficult place to be, it's the work. It's the work of our time. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining me again.